Okay, so we are still in the Mishnah Dalet of Perek Hamishi, chapter 5, Mishnah Dalet. There were 10, it says 10 miracles happened in Mitzrayim and 10 miracles al Hayam, by splitting of the sea. Rambam pointed out that the 10 by Misraim, they are almost all of them are explicit in Pesukim, meaning that they were saved from the 10 Makot. However, the 10 miracles by Yam Suf, they are not explicit in Torah. They are tradition, we have it, and later on, mostly in Tehillim and in other places, but mostly in Tehillim, are mentioned. That's what Rambam says. It's not said. We are going through this time of the year, we are going through the stories of Yetziat Mitzrayim, but it says it's not in Pesukim, these miracles. Let's see. Aval ha'asara nisim shayu alayam hem kabbalah. Says the 10 miracles that happened on the sea, that is, we know it from tradition. Harishon Havkat Hamayim, except the first one. The first one is the fact, very miracle, that the water split. Now it's very interesting. We have these images in our mind of how water split and whatever. Now we're going to see from the Midrash how it was. So that's Kipashuta Shel Pasuk. This is the very simple reading of the Pasuk. It says, Vaybaku Hamayim, the waters split. There was a sort of a path that opened in between. Hashani, miracle number 2. Shachar shebak'u na'asu kekuba. Exactly. That's sheshav kedugmat gag. That the water split, it wasn't open on top, it was like a tunnel. There was sort of a glass ceiling, a very literal glass ceiling, not a allegorical, a real ceiling from solidified water. I don't want to say frozen because we see it's a little bit different than the ice that we imagine. So it was solidified water.
More shakuf.
Nachon. Okay. Velo mekora velo meshupa. It wasn't a straight flat roof and it wasn't on a slant. It was a tunnel. That's right. It was it was a tunnel shape.
How many tunnels?
Are we going to see? Very good. So it's a tunnel in the water. So you have water on the two sides and above the head. And this miracle is not explicit in Pesukim of Torah. However, says Rambam, this is what is mentioned in Sefer Chabakuk. Chabakuk says, Nakata b'matov rosh prazav, that you drilled a hole through. He says, what is he talking about, drill a hole? Because there was water on top also. Shelishi, she'ason nitkasha v'nikpal lahem. Ki'omro halchu bayabasha. Number 3, that the earth that they walked on solidified. It wasn't, even if you say the water wasn't there, or there was a little bit water, at any rate, bottom of the seabed is muddy. It's not so clean. No, over there, it's solidified. It's solidified. That's nest number 3. And that's what Pasuk says, Halchu bayabasha. They walked on dry space. It wasn't wet. Not only was not water, it wasn't even wet. On the ground there was no mud like other riverbeds, as we said. Miracle number 4, that on the contrary, when the Misrim followed them in, this is even before the waters came back. Even before the waters came back and the Misrim started to drown, as they were going, it was very muddy. They got stuck. It was swampy like. V'omro chomer mayim rabim. That it was huge amount of mud. Chamishi, miracle number 5. Shenifkeu lederachim rabim k'mispar hashvatim. The answer to dear friend's question, that it was not one tunnel, it was many tunnels.
12.
That's right, 12 tunnels. Ken keshet agol, like a
semicircle or
semicircle.
Why
That's
is it
right.
bringing Habakkuk as proof? How does Habakkuk know that?
How does Habakkuk know? It's a tradition. But we know that that's what that pasuk means. It's a tradition. Rambam says, Mesoret, it's all tradition. It's all midrashim. It's Torah Sheba'al Peh. So interesting. Sometimes something for many generations is Torah Sheba'al Peh, and then it turns into Torah Shebichtav. Now, this is not the forum for this, but there is a difference in reality of Torah Shebichtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. When something makes that jump from being Torah, it's still the same. But when he makes the jump, there is a change in the reality of the world. Right? As far as our action, as far as our halacha, it makes no difference. We do not have, I'll give you an example, it was relatively a short time. We do not have the mitzvah of Periyah mentioned in Torah. By Milah. Right? You know, there is a Periyah by Milah.
Right.
Most people don't know what Periyah means.
maybe that's what the problem what we had recently. Somebody talked about we know that the father, the rabbi, and his son are performing in Shiraz.
It may be, I don't know. I don't think that thing was handled correctly. I think, unfortunately, it is this sensationalizing everything, even if it's not true, making a story out of it, had to do a lot with it. That even amongst Torah Jews, we have become a little bit of a, we worry about showmanship much too much, and about tochen, about content less, unfortunately. But be that as it may, the limb of Brit Milah has a skin like the rest of the body. Right? That skin is called Orla. That is an extension of the skin that is on the rest of the body. However, under it there is a thin membrane. There is a thin membrane, which perhaps if we wanted to call it, we wouldn't even call it a skin. It's a thin membrane, it's a cover that covers the tip of the Ever Hamilah, the tip of the limb over there. So when Milah is done, how it was done for thousands of years is you have to cut the Orla, that means the skin, the foreskin that is covering, that is the skin itself, that is cut. Then that thin membrane, which is also covering the tip of the Ever, with the nail, they opened it, they made a little rip in the side of it, and they folded it over down to uncover the tip of Brit Milah. That's how it was done for many generations till quite recently. Now,
Ashkenazim and Sephardim?
yes, everybody. It's just that recently now, with the advent of surgical tools, you've seen they have this. It looks like a little pin, but it's with a very blunt tip. It's very round. It's a tip that cannot cut or cannot cause damage. You understand why it would be a problem before we had this. You try to put a knife under that skin. It's extremely dangerous. They did it with their hand.
Right.
What they do nowadays is this skin is attached to the meat. So you've seen recently when they do Brit Milah, they take that thing, they go under. So they basically dislodge the inner membrane, which is in halacha it's called or haperiyah, the covering that is called periyah. So once they dislodge it, why do they do that? To save the baby the pain of having to do it twice. As I said, what it was done, the foreskin was cut and the inner membrane was cut open and folded over. Now that it's dislodged, they cut both of them together.
Is that kosher?
It's supposed to be.
It's most people do it like this. Hasidim do not do it like this still. Hasidim do it differently.
Always.
Hasidim do it differently.
Rabbi Nissim Davidi.
Rabbi Nissim Davidi, unless you request from him, he does it together. It's called Mila Priya Bevat Achat. There is a question. See, what I'm about to tell you, the question is like this. The Zohar Kadosh says, and the idea, not that Chasrom anybody disagrees with this Zohar, and it's very, very important to know because almost everything in our life is related to that. Like Zohar says, there are two things in the world. There is Ora Milah and Ora Periya. There are things in this world that you must get rid of. There is evil that you need to get rid of it. But a lot of things in our life are not like that. There are things that you need to turn over. Right? Or Noga, that is called. Almost every mitzvah, according to the Kabbalistic way, has that thing. There is that pesolet that is totally out. But there is that which is not, it's diamond in the rough. You got to get rid of the thing, you got to polish it in order to find the diamond. So he says that's what these two represent. We have what we cut and we have what we turn over to make it appropriate and right. A lot of things, a lot of midot in our life, things that we must really get rid of are very few. There are things that you must adjust, you must turn over. That's what, again, the Kabbalistic term for it is or noga. It's a light, but you gotta bring it out. You gotta bring it out. So be that as it may, that's why there are two separate skins, Kabbalistically speaking. So the question is, okay, we understand there are two things that is being done over here. Does it have to also in practice be two actions or not? So Hasidim are makbid to do two separate actions. That's right. That's right. With their fingernails. That's right. With their finger. Okay. At any rate.
Is that why the crown has blood when they cut it because of that?
Well, it has blood. No, it has blood because of the skin.
Skin's got
It's
blood.
the skin.
No, the skin has blood.
The crown itself,
has blood.
it's possible. I really don't know. You have to ask somebody.
Because that also hurts.
Yeah.
The crown, you don't cut the crown.
The crown is reddish. See, that's his
Reddish.
question is after Berit Milah, the crown is reddish. The question is why. Is it because of the blood or what? Okay, let's move on. At any rate, we sort of got off track. The point is this: in Torah, we do not have Torah explicitly talk about Periah. Where is it written? In Sefer Yehoshua. Sefer Yehoshua says that Yehoshua did Periah. So now, the mitzvah obviously was given to Moshe. We know no mitzvah is going to be added later. Moshe Rabbeinu had the mitzvah of Periah. He taught the Jews how to do Periah. But nowhere in Torah is it mentioned in written Torah. It was oral tradition. It was an oral tradition. It was a halacha Moshe Sinai that is not written. Then later in a Sefer of a Navi, namely in Sefer Yehoshua, it's written. So too over here. In Sefer Habakkuk, it's written about that oral tradition we had about this idea that the Kriyat Yam Suf, it was like a tunnel inside the water. Right?
So
it was an oral tradition.
Open, like,
That's right. It wasn't open. The top was not open.
so
The top was not
It
open.
says separated water, so that means it's
It separated means the tunnel inside of it. The tunnel inside of it separated the water to the sides and to the top, however it was.
So Bismillah Avraham پس پریه نداشته.
Okay, so the question is, Rashi brings down that over, time with age, things change. So Avraham Avinu being already at age 100, that membrane was pulled back naturally already, right? Because he had been married for many years. He's 100 years old. I don't know at what age he got married, but he's been married for a while, right? So,
Part of his skin.
99. I'm sorry, you're right. right? So that membrane was pushed back as a result of being married for a while.
So on Yitzchak maybe was done.
Not only it was for sure done.
Really?
Rashi brings down, very nice. Rashi brings down that by Avram there was no period, because not that there was no period, not that he didn't do the mitzvah, there was no occasion of the mitzvah. By Yitzchak it was both done milah and period. That's correct. That is correct.
Do we have any reference for other mitzvot that is not completely described and detailed from, in the Torah by the Nevi'im or later on generations? I.e., no, it's a reference, like here you talk about Yeshua talking about Torah because Moshe Rabbeinu knew it, he didn't write it down. It was written only just for Brit Milah. Now, let's say mitzvah, putting on tefillin or making tefillin.
Tefillin is all halacha Moshe Sinai, right?
No.
Now the question is, was it later revealed some of those halacha Moshe Sinai? Not that I'm aware of. We know that tefillin is the one mitzvah with the most halacha Moshe Sinai. It is Torah.
Yeah.
Written Torah is very mum about tefillin.
Yeah.
We have 4 pesukim about tefillin. Two in Kadeshli, one in Shema, one in Vayim Shema. And it doesn't say much. It says put it on.
That is important.
Put it on. Put on what? What color? Right?
As important as something like that, you would think that.
Not just the opposite. The importance of it is the reason. It's like unquestionable. It's you can't question it. It's
No, not the question. To give guidance. To talk about
after.
Let me tell you something. Let me tell you what Kuzari says. This is very, very important. People always ask a question. Who said oral Torah? Why oral Torah? If you think about it for a minute, it's just the opposite. The written Torah is the real question. Oral is obvious. If you don't have an oral tradition, you got nothing. There is a book I recommend very much everyone to read it. The book is called Blue Star Under the Red Square. It basically chronicles the refusnik movements in Russia. Right? Most of us here, my kids, when I talk to my kids about communism, they have no idea. Most of us here do remember before 1992, when communism was alive and well in what was then called USSR. So for 70 years, they literally killed all mention of Judaism, everything. Now in late 70s, early 80s, there was this movement, they were called refuseniks. Refuseniks, basically the movement started because they wanted to immigrate to Israel, and the Moscow government wouldn't let them. So it was like a miracle. Hashem really works in wondrous ways. That reawakened. You're talking about people who literally didn't know Aleph. You've seen Russians who literally, are people whose grandfathers may have been a Gadol B'Torah, but because of the persecution of the communist government, they hardly, most of them did, but some of them didn't even have Brit Milah. They didn't do anything. No, nothing. They kept, imagine, from the age 4, they tell you God is for the weak. It's the opium of the masses, etc., etc., etc. Most of these people grew up. So, anyways, this idea that they wanted to move to Israel, they identified with the homeland. And now they were being sort of persecuted against. They weren't given permission to. So that reawakened their Jewish identity. So they started to look for anything Jewish. And slowly, with some help and with reading and this and that, they rediscovered what being Jewish means. It's amazing. This is what the book is about.
Sharansky was at the,
his wife is a full-fledged Barat Teshuvah. Sharansky himself was one of those. Unfortunately, he was much more Torah-oriented before he ended up in government. In government, he had to do some horse trading, so it's sort of, be that as it
His
is.
wife is Barat Tshuva?
He himself was bound.
He is.
His wife was much more chazak than himself. He was sort of okay, I put on the kippah on Shabbat, and then getting into the government, he had to, he had to adapt himself in order to to function within his position. So unfortunately, it's
But
sort
now
of
when he
backtrack.
retired-
But even now,
Yeah. But he
even now,
retired.
he's not.
Is
He's
he
not.
Shabbat or not? That's the question.
I think he is. I
He is.
think he is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
He was a good
sure.
Really?
Yeah, he is.
Right.
A couple of months ago, a few years ago.
But anyways, they Rabbi Eliyahu Esses, he became their leader. He's now a big Rosh Kollel in Yerushalayim, but he became the rabbi. He started to study. He started to make summer camps. He would take, because in the city their activities were very much monitored. He would take. I'll just say this parenthetically. He says he would take people on this 2-week vacation, because that was part of the summer in the communist regime. Everybody, like the whole country, sort of shut down, and they would go to countryside. And over there, he says they learned Michtav Eliyahu, and they learned Rab Chaim Shmulevitz. He taught them literally, and he says he had this thing. Everybody, he told them, any question you have, I will answer. Any question you have, I will answer, except one question. I ask that one question be kept for the last day of the seminar, for the day 14 of our 14-day retreat. Is there a God? Does God exist? That I will answer you that, but you cannot ask me that question till day 14. He says, all those people that ask me that answer, you have to wait. None of them ever asked it. After learning Torah for 2 weeks, you don't have any questions. That's what he says. All you have to do, which is what Gemara says. When we're talking about people over here who had no exposure to belief and Emunah Judaism whatsoever. But Torah says, even if you forget about Hashem and keep Torah, Ma'or Sheba, the light of Torah will bring you back. It's so true. It is so true. Learning Torah does it. Be that as it may, I just want to say this because this story changed my world really, and sort of then I understood what Kuzari says. So he says he bought books. He went to old bookstores, found Jewish books in Russian, and eventually taught himself Hebrew and found Sefarim. He says he learned about Shabbat. He learned about Kiddush. He knew Hilchot Kiddush in Shulchan Aruch, Siman Resh Samach Aleph, Resh Samach Bet, Resh Samach Gimel. 3 simanim in Shulchan Aruch, Mishavur talks about Hilchot Kiddush. What it could be, what type of cup, what type of wine, the cup has to be this, if the cup is chipped, all those halachot, what time of the day. He says, I knew everything by heart, verbatim, I could quote you the whole thing. But I didn't know how to make Kiddush. I had never seen it in my life. So I didn't know what it meant. Okay, I know all these details. I know all these details. It's like, you tell someone, when you want to drive, you hold the wheel like this. He's got to get in the seat, and someone's got to. You could tell him everything about the wheel, and he won't help unless somebody is there to tell him. Here you go. So he says, I knew everything by heart, but I didn't know how to make Kiddush. So he tracks down a 76-year-old rabbi who was exiled to some far out places of Russia, and he takes off a Friday. He gets a sick day on a Friday. Thursday, right after work, he gets on a train. He's on the train Thursday afternoon till Friday morning to make it to that rabbi. And he stays with the rabbi, and Motzei Shabbat, he comes back on the train. A 16-hour train ride or something. So he spends Shabbat with somebody, he knows what Kiddush means. From now on, he'll be able to make it. He just had to see how Kiddush is made one time. Think about it. This is the truth. You really, written doesn't help you unless you have a Mesorah. Kuzari says, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Those who want to give us a hard time about Torah Shabbat, but the oral Torah, they themselves agree, if they really want to be honest, that they're lost. Okay, so you don't believe in oral Torah, fine. You believe in everything written? Yes. What does it say here? Bereshit bara Elokim. What does it mean? In the beginning God created. Who told you? Maybe these 3 words mean it's such a nice weather. Who told you Bereshit means in the beginning? Kuzari says. Who told you? because we have a tradition from previous generation. That's what this world means. Otherwise, it's even written Torah. He says even more than that. Forget about it. Okay, maybe even you know what the word is.
Situation.
The Aleph Bet, the one says,
You know.
teach me Aleph Bet. Who said that this is Aleph?
That's right.
Now, but who says
Even if-
halab or chelef?
That's what I was about to say. So even if you say, okay, somehow we know the alphabet and somehow we know the meaning, there the nekudot, the vowelization for sure is Torah Sheba'al Peh. It wasn't written.
Amen.
It wasn't written if it is chalav or cherev or whatever, and a lot of words you could read totally different.
Yes.
So therefore,
Chelef, you know.
the truth of the matter is, if you think about it, everything we in our life believe in is oral. Is oral. Now, when the oral gets to be too old or whatever, so then we rely on written. Otherwise, written is less reliable than oral. That's the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter is oral is the real thing. The only reason Torah Shebichtav works because we have an oral tradition that this is Torah Shebichtav. These are the words, and this is what the words mean. And as you said, over here it's chelev, over there it's chalav. That's why Torah Shebichtav works, because we have our own tradition, what it is. Right? Now, why, that is a little bit beyond. There is, if you look at, Zohar, other things, Chachamim, there is a difference in the reality. I'm not talking about in the practice. In the practice, they did Periyah before it was written and after it was written. Periyah was done. But the fact that it changed from Torah Sheba'al Peh to Torah Sheba'al, it talks about something changed in the, if you will, the perspective of how this world works. That something changed in that realm. I don't know. Anything that is in written Torah is much less flexible. Is absolute. Oral Torah is not as absolute.
It's limited.
That's correct.
Now, I was listening. Now, Mizrahi, in his talk about oral Torah, he says, just imagine if the things that we know in oral Torah was not oral and it was written. Like, for example, how to make tefillin, how to make sisit, how to make, things like that, kiddush. He says, then you would see anybody, like some group from China would come and have a tefillin and have a sisit and say kiddush, and say, would come and say, we are Jews.
Part of it
How
is.
can you accept them? They have everything. So this had to be
That's
tradition
part of
to-
it is that he
to
has
rabbis in order for them to
know how and when to disseminate.
know who's Jewish, who's not.
Yeah,
Otherwise, Judaism would change its face as we know it.
correct. Okay.
اینا علنه کاور باش رو موقعی که رفتم
بزنم.
Did you go with them inside the tunnel?
I don't know.
Yes. I don't know.